Okay, good afternoon. We will start. This is the third lecture. You saw up to now what we are doing. I took the concept of a space, but not like we used to do it, like a space that could be open or closed, depending of the situation. We discussed the studio, and each time, and domestic space and all that, and each time you saw that in a way, these spaces are ambivalent. They are closed and open, the two aspects. Like the last one on the domestic space, at first, when I started to work on this, I said, well, this is a good case of very closed space. It's intimate, it's private, and how the painter will deal with this. And then you saw, if you want to give the family as an example, as in the whole heart of Quebec with the Ole family, you have to open it, you have to show it, you have to show what they are doing. So they end up in clouds in front of the God and praising God, and that's it. And when painters of closer to our era, to our time, want to express the kind of private area, like Colville did, like you saw this woman in a bathtub and things like that, then you saw the very fact that they take this as a subject matter, in fact, put them in an open space and define more or less our relation with the subject matter almost as voyeuristic. You are looking at something that normally you should not look at. And even the fact that Colville in this painting put a man who is always himself, of course, watching what you are looking at, make you even feel more embarrassed about this situation. You remember this kind of ambivalence, but it's a fact that in this type of subject, the very idea of to represent it is already a way to open it. Today I will deal with a more broad type of space, what I call a communal space. I suggest that if we forget about just the family, but we think of a community, and especially here in Canada where we have a pluralistic society, as you know, the idea of representing certain community and putting them, say, in front of the eye of the painter have been quite exploited. Especially think, for instance, of the First Nations, to depict them as a particular community, in the sense that these are a group of people who share the same values, share even the same history, if you want, the same orientation, also eventually the same taste, and like to meet together for ceremonial objective or even for recreational objective. So this is the type of thing I would like to deal with. So you will see, we will give some importance to the First Nation, to their conception of that. And also, I thought of the French-Canadian community also, how it was represented. And, well. As you notice, I start the lecture habitually with a kind of very recent work of art. And who have, in my view, a certain relationship with the subject I want to discuss. And last time, you remember this video by Holson and this kind of ghost coming in the domestic space. And this time, I thought of the work of Ken Monkman, who is a Toronto artist and who's very present now in the museum. He's well represented here. I will just show you a few of his pictures, and then the work I want to stress more. The important picture that we recently bought at this museum is this one. It's called Trappers of Men, done in 2006, so it's a very recent thing. You may have seen it if you go down in the new part of the museum where we have the, I would say, contemporary Canadian painting. He's from Toronto. He's a métis, meaning that his mother is Cree and his father is Irish. And so that's why it's called monkment, but in fact, he is very conscious of his First Nation belonging, if you want. And when I saw this picture, say when it was presented to our committee of acquisition, I said, oh my God, this is a kind of a little bit very, very cleverly done, but it's a copy of probably of Albert Bierstadt. Bierstadt is a well-known American painter, of course, from German origin. He was trained in the Dusseldorf school, very academic type of training, and he got enthralled by the landscape of the West and created this big machine, if you want to, this big painting, very gaudy like this, and with a lot of effect of clouds and things. And I said, okay, I thought, well, Monkman just imitate a little bit that, but he did more than imitate. It seems to be an exact copy of the painting. This is the Bierstadt painting, okay? So you see, he really imitates everything. So at first I said, why? It's a little bit, it's good if you want to prove that you are very clever with your brushes and all that, but it's a little bit stupid also to take so much time to do exactly the same that another painter did. The big difference, if you see in the foreground here in the Bierstadt painting, you have a series of deers that appear. So the idea, of course, is to say this is a very wild country. Nobody ever saw that before. And him, Bierstadt, who accompanied the expedition of Colonel Lander, I think, with other artists, announced in the newspaper of the time that what he wanted to do is to represent the scenery, the wild scenery of the West, and also eventually of the Indians that he will meet in this region and all that. And the idea was to make sketches on the spot and then come back in New York and in his studio of New York, of course, to do this big, big painting. So the deers are the foreground. If you look at the Monkman picture close and you look at the foreground, then you realize that it's different, that there is something else. You have suddenly these people who are on the beach and who took the place of the deer that we have before. They are where the deer would have been. And on the middle, you see anyway, it's easy to see. You have Lewis and Clark who are represented there. These are the famous discoverer, of course, of the West. And on the left, there's a curious scene there where you see Mondrian, because if you look at the picture he's painting, it is a typical Mondrian like this. And he's like bowled over and falling on the ground if another guy behind him was not holding him. And this is an obvious portrait of Jackson Pollock. Okay, so he took these two painters that are like absolutely surprised by what they saw. If I go back, you will see that in front of them, there is a kind of apparition or something, that kind of, it looks like a lady floating in midair in front of them. So that's why they are bowling over, because, wow, they see suddenly this thing. And I will show you a close-up of this. You will see this is what they are looking at, okay? And at first, you think, okay, this is an imitation or inspired by any statue or any sculpture of the time that I show you on the right. There is, it's a typical academic type of subject, la nature se dévoilant devant la science. C'est nature revealing itself in front of science. Done by an obscure sculptor, Monsieur Barrias, Louis-Ernest Barrias, in 1899. So it's really type of things that the Musée d'Orsay is obliged to show, but they could keep it in their in their entrepot if it was just me. Okay. Anyway, so when you look more carefully to the painting by rather a drawing by Monkman, first you see that is sign mischief, with a kind of play of word, easy to understand. And then the anatomy of this apparition is male, is not female like in the sculpture that you show there. The sexual orientation of Monsieur Monkman are well known. He's gay, and he have used this also in other paintings, like here, it's a kind of imitation of Jean-Léon Gérôme, a famous picture in which you see Pygmalion falling in love with this sculpture and transforming it by his very love in a real person. And that's what you see on the right. And so he make a transposition of that, and he call it in French, I will go back, he call it Si je t'aime, prends garde à toi, like in the Carmen, I think, in the opera. And so he was sculpting, let's say, an Indian on a horse, and by kissing him, he give him life. And you have his model on the bottom, on the left side. You have the sculpture that he's imitating. And this sculpture is very, very, very well known. It is this thing here done by Frederick Remington, another artist that I didn't put too high, not to say I put him very low, but anyway, he have done this thing was called The End of the Trail, and it has been copied thousands of times. Everybody has it in the United States. I even saw a huge copy of this, like a 3-story high, you see, The End of the Trail. See? It's not very encouraging for the First Nation, but anyway. And he took this and transformed it, of course, differently. And you see by there's a little Cupido also in his painting, like in the painting of Gérôme, but he have a mask of a thunderbird, like it should. It's a Cupido who turned Indian also. So you see the type of artists who are dealing with. Always his work have this aspect of a little bit ironical, a little bit engaged also in the gay movement and trying to defend certain of the idea. The work I want to insist more in the context of this present lecture is this one that was presented. It's no more a painting, it's an installation. It's quite complicated in a way. And that was shown at the National Gallery this winter, and in a series with a series of work in an exhibition called Caught in the Act, because they were encouraging the spectator to visit and to enter. And so when we come in the area where Monkman have his work, we saw suddenly a teepee like this in the middle of the museum. And this is already a little bit weird because the teepee normally is outside. And with velvet curtain and with a kind of, comment est-ce qu'on dit, tissu damassé. The teepee himself is like with very precious type of cloth. And it's called Boudoir de Berdache, which is a kind of intriguing title. If you try to situate it a little bit in a certain context of art history, it seems that it is an allusion to a thing that George Catlin, who is an American artist who was also specialized in Indian subject, have done before him in the Louvre. Catlin had made all the little square you see around the room here are supposedly his painting. And it's portrait of Indians, all the same size, and a little bit kind of boring collection, but anyway, there was a lot of them. And he wanted to sell the whole thing to a government. Let's say he tried in England, didn't work, he went to France, and that's why it's in the Louvre now. And suddenly he heard from Louis Philippe that the Queen of Belgium is coming, so this is perfect, you will have 2 kings or 2 queens to try to sell the whole thing. So he organized a teepee in the middle of the Louvre, like you see. He had the nanny with the 4 little girls are his children. They were permitted to make a courtesy, I guess, to the queen. So they were all excited, and he came. And you see that the people are intrigued by the teepee. They want to look what it is inside and all this. Exactly like we have, we do also when you see the Monkman installation. The other thing, the other relationship with Catlin is more subtle than that. The other one is this one. why he called it the boudoir of Berdache, you will understand. It seems that in certain tribes, and especially the tribe on the plains, like the Sioux, the Foxes, the Sacs, had this idea that homosexual had two spirits, masculine and feminine, and because of that, they should be honored more than others. And so they have a dance of Berdache like this. The Berdache is a French word that was used then by people like Kathleen and others, but comes from the Persian berdaj, who means a young homosexual or a young male prostitute. That's what it meant, berdaj. So the boudoir of Berdache, in a way, it is the little space, say, the private space, I would say, of gay young homosexual. The thing which is represented here, this dance de Berdache, done by Kathleen, is not true in a way, because what they if you look at the face of the dancer around the gay guy, who is on the right side and who seems to be a little bit shy and badly treated by the others because they look as if they were laughing at him. This is not true. In the contrary, they were very often in the society honored and find, like I told you, like somebody who have not only one spirit but have two, and as such should be well treated, let's say. And of course, I didn't plan that 6 months ago. But today, you can see the dance of Berdache done by Monkman in the second story of the museum, where I show you just 2 pictures of it. But basically, it's 5 panels like this in which you project video and in which you are suddenly in the middle. So instead of, it's like an inversion of the picture of Kathleen. You understand the way it is. Alors, when you enter in the big teepee that I was showing you, the boudoir of Berdache, you see exactly that he developed this idea. There's a kind of nice couch there. On the floor, you have some little valise done by Vuitton, and you have a typical blanket of the Hudson Bay Company, and a buffalo skin on the floor. And then this big candelabra on the top, you know. And you look, you have inside of the teepee, you have also 2 benches where the public could sit. And of course, the photograph have this behind his back when he takes this picture. And so you sit there, and then you suddenly see 2 little movies there that are more or less the same. There are certain little difference between both, but you have the feeling that one goes a little bit faster than the other, but it's the same subject. And what they display, it is these 2 guys dressed in a Hollywood Indian fashion, you know, they look perfect. And they are solicited by the famous photographer Curtis that you see on the right, not in a very polite position, the less I can say. And he tried to explain to them in the film, you know, make a typical Indian dance. And he goes and he showed them, say, you have to have your arms above your head like this and to look Indian, you know. And he teach them to do it. And the 2 guys don't understand. And what they are doing, it's a kind of fantastic break dance, you know, that you see them. You want something authentic and new, they will do that. So if you think of all the layers implied in the, oh yeah, the only word I've not explained a little bit is the boudoir. Boudoir comes from bouder in French, and bouder is to sulk. So traditionally, in the 18th century, the boudoir was a little room for women only. No, I don't know why the woman should be seen sulking all the time, but anyway, because they were very well treated in the 18th century. Anyway, they had this little space for them. And so the boudoir of the Berdache, you understand what it means. It's a kind of private space for the gay people, and also kind of criticism to our society, who is not giving a boudoir to the gay and making their life very difficult. And and also making us realize that this so-called First Nation, in fact, are probably more civilized than us in this issue. You understand that in many layers, there's a political meaning and also this kind of, okay. Then, if you have a boudoir, that means topologically that you have a kind of small space, and it asks right away the question, what is the hegemonic space? What is the big space of which they are excluded? For instance, in the 18th century, this boudoir for women was, of course, that the big space were for men. And so we were pushing them in this little boudoir, sulk as much as you want, but we don't want to hear you. And so we will make this little, so the question then is this, what is the hegemonic space? What is the big space that this represents like an excluded space? And if you stay still in the First Nation, the obvious answer of that is the huge houses, the big houses of the Northwest Coast. If you say a typical village of the Northwest, well, in photo done in 1885, of course, because it will not be like this today. Mind you, with certain revival, they are going back to these big houses. It's a kind of communal house, in which, when we say big, it's like 12 by 15 meter in square on the ground, and easily more than, I would say, 4 meter high. So it's quite big. In this, you could have about 30 to 50 people living there, meaning habitually a chief, and with his wife or wives, and their children, and also 2 or 3 related family, and sometimes some visitor from outside. So it's a kind of extended family who live in each of these big houses. And they were used also for communal purpose, eventually. You notice that 2 of them have decoration on the facade. They are painted a little bit, and this habitually designate a more important chief. What is the importance? It is the guy who is richer, of course, like in any society, but also the one who have a lineage more prestigious than the other. If you are in direct descendants of the Raven and of this, of that, and that, then you are more respected, and you are allowed to have this painting on your facade. The painting here is a whale that are presented here because, of course, these guys were whale hunters. You see their canoe on the foreground, and of course, let's say, I don't know, to hunt the whale, I guess, so you don't fish it, because. No, you must hunt it. Was probably not easy with the type of tools that they have, and that's why they brag about this. Here is kind of one of these big houses. It's an interesting photo because, again, it's 1895. It was demolished in 1899, so just before the demolition of the big house. It's called the Whale House this time. No decoration on the facade. And you see a bunch of kids in front of it to give you an idea of the scale of this. When I speak of big house, you see what I mean. When you enter in this big house, okay, this is the structure of it. When you enter, you have 2 or 3 features that are surprising. First of all, you have a kind of hole or depression in the floor there. That's where the fire is. And if you follow on the top, you will see there's an opening for the smoke to go out. And then in the back, completely, you have a big screen, habitually with a lot of decoration, which is quite close to the wall that closed the house in this direction. As if the screen, behind the screen, there's not much space for anything. You cannot sleep there, but habitually it's a place where they put masks and boxes and things that they want to put aside. This big screen is very surprising. Some of them, this is the one who was in the whale house I just showed you. I think it's the impression that you have when you enter in a Baroque church. The Baroque church very often is very plain outside, and it's not too decorative. But when you enter in it, bang! We have in our little church of Quebec some example of that. If you go to Saint Matthias, or you enter in this church, outside it looks very common, I would say. You look inside, it's full of gilded part and with gold and white and all this is quite surprising. Here it's a little bit the same effect. Huh? The outside is very plain, but when you enter, you see first this huge screen in the back. And there's an old photograph where all the people, the chief, were photographed, and you notice all the people there are males. They exclude women there. So this is an important photo. Only les gars. It's always this obsession with, and so the main personage in the center is the chief, is the one who is the owner of the place and who's responsible also to keep it well and all that. This big screen behind is a little bit difficult to interpret. We know, for instance, by another photo that it was not just painted, it was also in quite a low relief. So you can imagine all the work and all the invention behind such a thing. And as I tell you, if we make a kind of schematic presentation of the same decoration of the same screen here, you see that you have like a huge head in the middle, circled by these little personages who are squatting all around. And then probably the hole there, which is in fact a door in which you can enter and you can pass through, is a representation of the body of this mythical personage or whatever it is. And it finishes, if you see on the bottom part, on each side of this hole, you have claws and you don't have real toes or something. Huh? Ça va? You see it more or less. Okay, so this is kind of depiction, and you can imagine there's a lot of discussion about the meaning of this because it's old, and it's still in the village of Klukwan in Alaska, so that means in Tlingit territory, but we don't know exactly where it is, and not many white people have seen it. There was a lot of trouble in the community there with the screen. Some people wanted to keep it secret, and others said, this is ridiculous, it will disappear with time, and we should save it, and we should put it in a museum. And others says, no, this belongs to us, and even if it decay with time, it is our belonging, and we don't care of what the white man could do with it. And this discussion went on and on for years. Even very recently, we heard suddenly that the screen was bought by a merchant in Seattle, a art dealer, and put in a warehouse somewhere. And so then when the community heard that one guy has sold this thing, they got very mad at him, and they make a new discussion, and the things were brought back in Klukwan. And so we don't know exactly where it is, but we know, and in what condition it is, but we have these old pictures and a lot of work done about it. Okay, the main interpretation today of this, it is a representation of a raven. You will tell me this is not very explicit. Huh? But if you take the head and you look on each side, you have a kind of little pieces of things that could be seen as wings. Huh? And you say, okay, then this is, I could swallow that. But then you see in the bottom, under the head, you have two extended arms like this that finish with fingers. Huh? Okay, this is plus embêtant for a bird. Huh? Normally, you should not have hands. And then, but the claws, of course, of the feet put it back in the realm of birds. Huh? The main reason why they think it's a kind of a representation of raven, and they call it also the rain wall, it is because the chief belongs to the dominating crest of the chief is the raven. So the chief who owns a house is of the raven moitié, that means a very high echelon, and it's a dominating crest for him. And also that in the legend, one of the things that the raven did, it is to bring rain in the world. It's always this idea that the raven came to correct what God have done perfectly before. See? Before, there was only sun, it was beautiful, and then suddenly raven comes and bring the rain and created trouble with that. And there's always this trickster aspect in the raven story. Huh? And so, the drops that you see around him, the 13 little personages around him, who are squatting like this, and what we call in archaeology the hawker position. I look in my English dictionary, I say, what is this hawker? But you have to look in the German dictionary. It's a German word. It's come from hawke, that means to squat. And so that's this type of presentation that you see, for instance, in tombs or in many, many type of contexts, you could have it. And so when you go back to the main picture, okay, you will have even these little personage in the eye of the raven, and then it seems that all this can make sense together. Another photo, an old photo, where now the chief is alone with a kind of dress. That's interesting. That shows the skeleton of an animal, as if an X-ray representation of an animal. But you see in the cavity that corresponds to the hole there, there's a guy there that appeared there. Was not supposed to be there, of course, in the photo, but the photo was taken. And that shows that you can go behind the screen in this little space where they put all the treasure that they show here in the picture. And okay, this big house presented like that is relatively static, if you want. But in fact, when you see how they are used, for instance, this is a photo taken in Harlot Bay quite recently, in 1996, during a potlatch. You see that you could put a lot of people inside of these houses, and also that they can perform dances and things and have music and everything there. See? So when we speak of a big house and a communal house, you understand what I mean. Huh? This is a good example of it. And Le Boudoir of Monsieur Kent Monkman seems relatively modest in comparison to that. Huh? This is exactly the type of opposition you see that you should expect. Okay, after this little detour in ethnography, I thought, okay, let's make ethnography about ourselves now. Let's speak of the Québécois. How they are perceived. What is their big house, if you want, where this communal aspect of the culture will be expressed. And the first thing I thought, I said, so the guy who did the big house and insisted on one, maybe not aspect that we're too proud of it, is Krieghoff. And Krieghoff, I made few of these paintings in which you see inn, and habitually on the poster on the left there, where you see the little horse and the two barrel, it's called Joli Fou. It is the name of the innkeeper there. And you see all these merry people having fun. Whoops. This is just to wake you up. And the way it's presented, okay, you have all these people very active in the foreground, but what is very also present, even so much that we neglect to see it in a way, it is this inn. The idea of representing French Canadians being merry-goers like this and having fun and drinking their head off was not the happiest way to represent them to some of our historians. And one who was not happy at all with this is Gérard Morisset. Gérard Morisset is a man that I've met and that I respect very much, because we will not be there without him. You know, he really have worked on the whole history of I would say, Quebec art since the beginning up to now. And he was not a big fan of Krieghoff. For instance, in one of his first books, Coup d'œil sur les arts en Nouvelle-France, I would try to translate a little bit his prose, but let's see, you will see exactly what he means. He says, how to explain the popularity of Krieghoff, he says. This painter was a merry fellow who had no objection to have a drink with his clients, produced like a machine, picture easily accessible by their subject matter, drinking parties, a bunch of drunks, not too subtle comedy in his genre painting, autumn landscape with gaudy colors. Mainly, he exploited the secret desire of his clientele. And how is it possible to think that McTavish could say that he was the father of Canadian painting? He didn't like McTavish either. McTavish is a Toronto critic, let's say art critic. Okay. And he maintained this idea all the time. See, even later, Morissette came back on this also. He presented. He says, okay, maybe Krieghoff knows how to represent the envelope, or like he called it, or if you want, the surface of his people, but he doesn't penetrate their soul. He doesn't understand what he called la bonhomie française, the kind of, I would say, happy, kind of nice gentleness or whatever, or finesse. Oh, this is even better of these guys. And reduce them to a bunch of drinking people. And so he became very, very critical of that. But let's look more carefully at the painting first and then at the context, and you will see that maybe you could have another opinion about this painting than the one of Morissette. Morissette, in fact, in short, tell us that this is a very bad representation of the French Canadian. He's laughing at us, and he cannot be called the father of Canadian painting. That's basically what he was worried about. In this painting, you have, if you go completely to the right, you have a couple, young people, who are sitting in a kind of high set type of car, of voiture, if you want, and with kind of narrow metal runner. And nearby, you have the driver who is fighting with his wife on the balcony with snowballs. Instead of behaving nicely and taking this nice couple with him, they are losing their time because they are probably quite drunk, and so they throw each other. And then if you on the left completely, you have the French-Canadian Berlin, this type of low-grounded type with runner in wood and quite large, that was preferred by the French-Canadian at the time because they live in the country, and there was a lot of bumps and things like that, and this was more stable, even if what Krieghoff shows here, it's this Berlin is completely upside down, and everybody is shouting, and even in the background far, you see a guy with the two hands like this, who says, my God. In a way, what you see on the top of them is with the signification of barrel of rums, and what you see in the bottom is the cause and the effect. If you drink so much, that's what will happen with you. But the opposition here between these two types of voiture, how do you say that, carriage, let's say, is also the opposition between the English bourgeoisie on one side and the French-Canadian on the other side. So then Krieghoff now seems to be a little bit critical of the two groups, or at least conscious of them. Mind you, he represents the French-Canadian like not being very clever and turning their car upside down, and the others waiting patiently that they will be carried and behaving nicely. Okay? Then he went back on the subject when after this guy here, Sir Charles Metcalfe, who was the Governor General, decided to pass a law in which the English or British type of carriage would be the norm, and that the Berlin law on ground will be eliminated. So, of course, in the country, this was very badly seen. Metcalfe is an idiot, he comprend pas, we will not do that, and things like that, a kind of rebellion, of course, right away. You impose interdiction to French Canadians, right away they are boiling and they want to rebel. And the... I can say that myself. I don't dare to repeat it yourself. Anyway. And this is the type of carriage that that Metcalfe was proposing. This is very nice for Lieutenant Torrens and his wife in front of the Citadel of Quebec. But the French Canadian used to say, this is no good for the country, and we don't want this. And so that's why, in a way, Krieghoff came back to the subject. And this time, if you look on the right, you have again the English carriage, but where now the people that should be sitting in it are under the veranda, And the people who should run it is, again, throwing snowballs and things like that. So here, and the horses seem to be very excited and ready to go. So here, suddenly, it is the English who behave nastily. And in the contrary, the French Canadian on the other side are nicely speaking, what a nice evening we had and how long it is to go back and things like that, as if they behave nicely. The same thing, but then suddenly it's reversed. Huh? To understand, of course, the middle scene is a little bit the same in the two pictures. Huh? You see the violoneur, the violinist with his violin. In one, he have a lamp in the middle of the day. This is a sign of inebriation. And in the other, he have his bottle, so it's very clear. And then Krieghoff himself put himself in the picture. It is one of the guys that looks at the violoneur with racket, with this kind of snowshoes that he have. But you have you have a guy also, when you have a drinking place, you have always one who is very sad suddenly. My life is finished and all that. You have one who is sitting in the stairs like this. And then another one on the veranda on the left who's still with his glass like this. Vive la reine ou n'importe quoi. All these little scenes like this make us forget always the fact that the communal space there is an inn, is an auberge. But to understand the real signification of this picture of Krieghoff at the time, you have to know a little bit of the context of I would say, the repression of the church on this type of habits. You have, for instance, some commandment of bishops saying, if you want to establish good behavior in your parish, destroy the merry-going. And he says, they will say, the worst place to go is in. This is la boutique du diable, the devil shops, if you want. Or don't go with a woman who likes to dance. You know, she is in the boutique du diable already. See? So don't. So there was all this thing, and especially it seems that the booze was cheap at the time, and people became more and more merry. And so the Bishop Bourget decided to make really a big effort on that, and with the help of Monseigneur Formin-Janson, a kind of a French Monseigneur, they established what they call the Société de Tempérance. No? And then there was two. There was les Lacordaires for men, and there were les Jeanne d'Arc for the women. So if you were in one of these society, you promised never to drink, not to have booze in your place. And you had on the wall this big black cross. You remember? I showed it to you in Mrs. Brade's home on the wall. Huh? And this was a sign, yes. It reminds me of a joke. Maybe I told it already, bear it a little bit. It is une Jeanne d'Arc et un Lacordaire that goes in France and go in a café there. So the garçon came with his plateau. He says, qu'est-ce que je vous offre, madame? Oh, je ne bois pas, je suis Jeanne d'Arc. And then, qu'est-ce que je vous offre, monsieur? Ah, je ne bois pas, je suis Lacordaire. Alors le garçon said, ah ben alors moi je suis Napoléon. It certainly happened, as I tell you. Okay, but you see the context of these pictures, meaning what Krieghoff is representing. In fact, it is a kind of rebellion against this introduction from the church, and especially they had a famous preacher like Chiniki, for instance, who was going from places to places and getting more and more people involved in this Lacordaire and Jeanne d'Arc society. And he was a kind of rude and sometimes not polite type of talker, but he was very popular. People liked his type of sermon. And they were making demonstration of sorts. They will give alcohol to a pig and the pig will fall. And of course, this proves that you don't give alcohol to pigs, but anyway. But he was, there was a lot of demonstration like that. And himself was bragging about his good health. You know, he was a huge man. In fact, his real problem was not alcohol, but it was too much eating. But anyway, you can see the kind of atmosphere like that. So to show the inn, like the house where people like to be merry and to have fun, is a way. It's not like Morissette suggested, not to go to the soul or the spirit of the French-Canadian community, but maybe freedom or any reaction against oppression is also touching their soul. Oh, okay, you see a little bit my point. I want to show you now two pictures who are quite far in time, in which the same theme, very similar to that, will be depicted, if you want. The first one is by Joseph Légaré. And Légaré, I think we mentioned it already, Légaré was a painter of the 18th century. He was more or less the teacher of Plamondon, so a self-made man. When Morissette speaks of him the first time, he didn't have much respect for his art. He says his paintings are in very bad condition, which is true, because he was using bitumen, and bitumen with time become darker and darker, and at the end, you see almost nothing. Very cracked also, in very, very bad condition. And he says sometimes he can make a nice copy of this Gaspard Poussin, you know. Yeah, so I put them together. Well, a copy, well, I prefer the Poussin, the Gaspard Poussin. His real name is Gaspard Duguay, huh? But he was close to Poussin, and it was represented like that. So he says he could do that, but he was not such a kind of great painter. A little bit later, he changed his opinion about, because Légaré was very politically involved in the Quebec scene, and he was a patriot, and when he discovered that, well, he became a better painter. Huh? Okay, well. The painting I want to show from Légaré, it is the depiction of a Corpus Christi procession. You know what it is, at a certain time of the year, the people come out in the village, and you see in the middle, I was trying to find the word for that, and I asked my wife, who's Jewish, and he says, how do you say rupa in English? And she says a canopy, of course. And so you see the Blessed Sacrament is under a little canopy, and you have all the people behind, and they are going toward the church, and they finish their procession and coming in. And in the foreground, you see people on their knees when this passed. Huh? So then suddenly, you realize that the other big house in the French-Canadian community is the church. Huh? You have this polarization between the inn, if you want, on one side, and the church on the other side. And of course, picture of that kind will reflect that. And I think this is a picture that will reflect this so-called communal space that I'm speaking about. More than 100 years after, you have again a Corpus Christi procession, but now done by Jean-Paul Lemieux. Lemieux is a contemporary painter. He did that in 1944, where you see the city of Quebec, of course, and you see, again, the canopy on the right side a little bit, full of little anecdotal details. Even you have a little boy near a tree there doing pee-pee, and it's not supposed to be there, but anyway, he did that, and a lot of, and then you see that they are going from the cathedral in Quebec toward Notre-Dame-des-Victoires in the Basse-Ville. Huh? The procession is doing that. And you have all the league and all the group of people that you could imagine, because at the time there was a lot of embrigadements. You see, you have les Enfants de Marie in blue in the foreground, and then you have les Dames de Sainte-Anne, of course, the older guys, the older women. And then you have les Zouaves also on the right, you see them. And all of this, all these groups, let's say, marching like this carefully in the street of Quebec and ending up in Notre-Dame-des-Victoires, in the little church that you see in the background. If you look more close to the painting, you see also that he put on the houses names like Hôtel Palardy. And of course, for instance, this is an allusion to Jean Palardy, one of his friends, as a specialist of the old furniture in Quebec. And then he put F.X. Savard, it's François-Xavier Savard. And again, he makes some Hamel et fils. Alors, c'est, of course, Théophile Hamel and Eugène Hamel. Each time, it's a kind of allusion to or painters that he knows or people that he admired, and Félix-Antoine Savard and people like that. Okay. And then so they are walking like this very carefully, and you see this canopy in the middle with the monstrance, where the host is kept, is really the center of all this attention. When it passes, the people get on their knees, exactly like in the picture of Légaré, and they continue like this. But what is more surprising, it is this foreground, if you want. If you look, you have a guy who have his arm like this, crossed arms, and this is Lemieux. This is him, who is there. As a matter of fact, the Taverne du Peuple, Jean-Paul Lemieux, propriétaire. And of course, he put also a little bit there on the left of it, on his left, on his right, because he's facing us. Négrito, in which it's written fermé, because when the church is in the street, you don't go to the tavern. It's one or the other. If the church is quiet, you can go to the tavern, but if it's everywhere, you don't do that. So he is like an onlooker to the whole thing. He's like detached a little bit. And near him is his wife with a nice hat, and in the window upstairs a little bit, you have a little poster there in white, in which he gave his name, Madame de Rosier Modiste. So it's nice. He make a little publicity for his wife, like this, nice guy. And on the right side, the man with the hat, with the kind of hat, is Gérard Morisset himself. So he's somebody that he know. And I don't know if I have, no, I have another. Among the Zouaves, we don't see him. Well, you see him a little bit on the guy who see just the head in blue on the right is Paul Rainville. This is the director of the Museum of Quebec at the time. Okay, so he put like this personage that you know. But what is, I think, more important to realize, it is this kind of detachment, this kind of irony about the whole things, as if this obsession with leagues and with groups of a well-defined group and women on one side, men on the other. Il y avait la Ligue du Sacré-Cœur pour les hommes, il y avait la Ligue des Dames de Sainte-Anne pour les femmes. Everything was in leagues like this. And so he mocked a little bit at that. He takes his distance of this. And I think Lemieux had a better sense of what people at the time could bear, or this type of criticism, than Bourdieu, for instance. That's why I wanted to show you the Refus Global. When Bourdieu write the manifesto and attack frontally, if you want, the church, that was not well seen, and it cost him his work and everything. It was like too early. But Lemieux, with his little detachment and irony, could make this painting without too much problem, and had one after the other. For instance, he made this one, who was almost naive, of Notre-Dame protégeant Québec. You see the Blessed Virgin in heaven like this, and all this little scene in the Quebec Street. A little bit the same type of composition that we have in La Procession de la Fête Dieu, except that it's maybe less well done and a little bit more. Somebody have reproached Lemieux to get this kind of point of view from heaven, in fact, being not only detached because he doesn't participate to the procession, but also because he showed us the scene from above, like a bird-eyed view. But in fact, it's not true. I think it's the same idea, like here, to show well the kind of geography and the topology of the place and how we finally get there. The fact that the irony of Lemieux about religious subject is a difficult subject to really weigh carefully, because you have this picture, which is now at the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, which at first reveal this big house, again, the church, but open, without a roof. And you see in the foreground on the left the vicar making a sermon, and everybody very quiet and very nice on their benches and listening to that carefully. Even in the jubé on the top there, you see that the player of harmonium have wait that he finishes damn sermon to begin to play music a little bit, and with the singers also around her doing nothing, very, very quiet. But on the right side of the picture, you see suddenly a funeral, in fact, going up toward the cemetery, who is in the top right corner. And there you have a scene absolutely astonishing. It is the resurrection of Lazarus by a modern-day Jesus who looks, he's dressed in a West Coast like me, and we have long hair. And he gets Lazarus out of the tomb, you know. So this, then you feel that the feeling toward religious subject here is authentic. It's not tyrannical, I think, here. In the contrary, he wants to, and especially look at the date of the painting, 1941, you were during the war. And the war is also alluded to on the left side, on the top there, you see parachute, you see big dark clouds and things. And so this idea of the resurrection of Lazarus is not completely neutral. It's just not something of which he's detached about, and he looks at it. So with Lemieux, I think we have to be careful when you interpret it. He has certain irony, but irony is a detachment, of course, but it's also, you could have affection with irony. You can be ironical, but you could have keep a kind of soft spot, let's say, for what you are making irony about. And in that sense, I think Lemieux was more in accordance with what the people at the time could bear, instead of Bourdieu going too far in the other direction. Well, I will finish this lecture with the kind of nostalgic type of picture, again by Colville. And it's called Visitors Are Invited to Register. This is what is written on one of the pillars there. And it's kind of an empty space of obviously a religious structure, but there's nobody in it except visitors. And visitors are not part of your community. They are not like the group I was speaking about. They come from any direction, and you see them suddenly. Maybe they could chat a little bit together, but then they go back to their sources, and they don't form a community. And this space here has something a little bit sad and a little bit nostalgic in a way, as if it's empty, there's nothing happening there. And so that's what can happen, of course, to some of these big houses. They get abandoned, and they get just a souvenir of houses. Okay, so that's it for today. Next time, I will deal with I thought I would finally find something that was really inside, and I thought, why not going inside of the brain, you know, inside of the mens. We'll see what we'll do. Okay, thank you.